Nukne. That's hello in Klingon. I figured I'd keep that theme consistent as this is basically a part 2 of my last video. In that video, I broke down how secular organizations and institutions can still be programmed to act like religious foundations, and I stated outright my belief that many, if not most, of these groups eventually devolve to that point. But I also believe this can be, if not prevented, at the very least tempered by reason. That is, if we understand what causes the devolution to occur in the first place. As I said then, that last video was the foundation of my little pet thesis. And so the object of our conversation today is to try and build up its metaphorical walls, the studs, joists, bricks, and mortar for which you are looking at on screen. I stated before how every religion, and by extension, every functionally religious organization, is structured around an ideology, which I also there defined as a belief system organized around obtaining some hypothetical perfect or ideal end state, be it heaven or nirvana or utopia or whatever. I also said that such institutions are hierarchical, and now I shall elaborate on their general caste structure, starting with the 4 fundamental forms of ideologue: shepherd, hound, sheep, and lamb. Yes, I know the picture says dog and not hound. I decided post hoc that hound sounded better, and as it doesn't change the meaning, I just couldn't be asked to go back and Photoshop it in. Sue me. Anyway, these 4 groups are defined both by their roles in their organizations, but moreover are described by what they want. Their prima modus, if you want to be all fancy and Latin-y about it. The shepherd wants what any king or dictator wants, to be in charge, but moreover to profit off the backs of their flocks, which ideally would entail him taking on a pseudo-paternal role in their lives, feeding them, raising them, guarding them against predation, and generally caring for and providing their basic essential needs. And in exchange, they would provide him a steady supply of wool and meat, both of which he could sell for a tidy profit. In human terms, this equates to the social contract between the ruling elites and the working populace. In a perfect world, we would see a symbiotic bond between the have and the have-a-little-want-more classes, as described in Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals, which would work to better the lives of all and ultimately raise up the have-not class. Of course, in reality, what we see is the shepherds trying to shear more and more fleece off of a dwindling stock. The more reckless and ruthless of these domesticated hyper-predators rule the roost, while the rest of the productive elements have to make do with their paltry leavings. The sheep, meanwhile, obviously want to be protected and provided for. Born and bred inside the shepherd's fences, most are too simple to really care about excess, or to contemplate a life outside the bounds of their safely enclosed pasture. Apart from being future sheep, lambs are characterized by their innocence, owed to their lack of experience with the real world. This manifests in their character as a general tendency towards honesty, as in they tend to believe things for honest reasons, and as a consequence will generally tend to ask honest questions, which can make them a serious nuisance for the shepherds and their hounds, the latter of whom we shall address presently. The hounds are an interesting batch, for without them the shepherd would not have a flock to fleece. The dogs don't care why the fence is there, nor what good or ill the shepherd means for the sheep. All they know or care about is that they are getting fed, which they know will only happen if their master gets his quota of wool. To that end, they do their jobs loyally and with aplomb, which is to keep the sheep in and anything that's not a sheep out. But you'll notice something interesting about the dogs, namely about their orientation. Notice they're all facing inwards, either towards the sheep or away from the shepherd. That is because, contrary to what the shepherd has bred his flock to believe, the hounds and fence are there not to protect the sheep from the wolves, but to control them, to make them easier for the shepherd to take their worth. How do they do that? By resembling the wolves, of course, albeit smaller, dumber, more domesticated versions, ones who have forgone their independent spirits in exchange for easier access to food and shelter. So, in brief, the shepherd wants power and profit, and so works to subvert and box in nature. The hounds want food and purpose, and so make themselves the shepherd's good little tools. The sheep want safety and security, and so divest themselves of everything but the most basic primal faculties. And the lambs just want fun and truth, but are destined to either become a wolf's food or a shepherd's commodity. So what does all this mean for us? Are we all doomed to be pawns in some cruel or fickle master's plan forever? Well, yes and no. One answer is that we can become wolves, stoic, strong, intelligent, and oriented towards our own pack first and foremost. It is at this point that I'd like to remind everyone that a wolf pack is just an extended family, usually centered around one breeding pair and multiple generations of their pups. Humans don't work exactly the same way, but if you look back into what actual traditional family structures were like throughout history, we're not really that far off. Now, obviously, those systems weren't perfect, and as for how to make the extended corporate family structure and its politics fit into a modern internet-enabled industrial paradigm, that's a subject for another video. I'd recommend checking out my much earlier one, Communism/Capitalism, What's the True Religion, for more of my thoughts on that front. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I have a Rumble and Locals account now if you want to check those out. Also, look for my books on Amazon if you like what you've heard and want to help support more like it in the future. And as always, fight well and long. Masuf